And that's the news in brief from the WOR newsroom. Bruce Elliott reporting. Your news as it happens on WOR. I'll be back at 11 o'clock with full 15 minutes of news in detail. Stay tuned now for Gene Shepard, right here on WOR New York, 710 on your dial.
Was made as a disclaimer. The radio station involved has nothing whatsoever to do with the personal, ethical, philosophical, and ridiculous ideas expressed on the show. Salute to the philosophical contents of the artistic work of Robert Goulet. And associated conglomerates. All right, before we begin tonight, I feel constrained to bring this to a Democratic vote. All of those who wish me to continue my program tonight, raise your thumbs upwards. Those of you who wish me to go fly a kite, put your thumbs down and holler boo. All right, the boos have it. We continue. I miss Bill Haley and the Comets. Where is Pat's domino tonight? Sometimes you just sit and watch on all the channels, nothing but panels. And that concludes tonight's opening salute to Robert Goulet. And certainly exciting. I'll tell you, things are getting more exciting by the minute. I walked into the control room here, and one of the engineers said, "I can't understand it." I said, "What do you mean you can't understand it?" He says, "Well, I can't understand it." He said, "Look at the tie you're wearing." He says, "You're going establishment. You're wearing a tie." I said, "I'm going establishment. I'm wearing a tie. I have a tie, probably the only tie in the eastern states region that lights up in the dark, and as a matter of fact, is battery operated. I use transistors in it, and it whistles Dixie if you press the right button. Now, have you noticed that tides, as the atmosphere becomes more polluted, and it becomes more difficult to see the moon and the sun, and that nature is retreating to a small enclave in the center of the state of Vermont, and we are left with nothing but millions of beer cans and old used pop bottles and cigarette butts and cigar butts and stuff that can be seen spreading all the way to the horizon, in fact, probably all the way to the shores of the great Death Valley Desert. That have you noticed that as nature is becoming more and more difficult to find, so nature, in the form of artificial creations by man, is becoming more prevalent. Big flowers on everything. You notice that people are pasting flowers all over their cars now? You know, the Wiki Stickies or Ticky Tickies or whatever they call them. Big flowers. They paste. How long has it been since you've seen a real live flower growing? Very rare. And now, that's right. And now my tie here is a fantastic example of true flowerdom. And, you know, it lights up in the dark and everything. Because naturally, would you please, a little of that more Goulet, yes? I'll tell you, sometimes you just don't know which way it's going. Oh, I figure it's all going to work out all right, Madge. I say, you know, it's on the tip of my tongue, I forgot. No, I'll tell you one time, though, I was talking to this guy, and I said, you never can tell what people are going to do. And he said, yep, that's right. You know, I think that we were right. I never forget, I always tell that story. You never can tell what people are going to do. In fact, I told about the bowling alley last week. Thank you. I just, you know, got to clean out the pipes here. Little note here from Long Beach, California. It says Mrs. Jackie Samay, 22, phoned police to ask what to do with, and we quote here, a pint of nitroglycerin in her refrigerator. Officers went to see her apartment, and they thought she was putting them on. Still, they had never seen nitroglycerin before, the cops. So they called Sergeant Al Abrams of the Long Beach Bomb Squad. Sergeant Abrams took a look. Then he sniffed. And then he tasted. Then he ordered a 4-block area cleared. A bomb squad from Fort MacArthur arrived an hour later to transport the stuff very carefully to the base for testing. It was a pint of nitroglycerin. A friend had given it to Miss Samay to throw at anybody who gave her any troubles, sometimes when she's walking home from work. That concludes tonight's salute to Thor, the god of thunder and lightning. And by the way, how long has it been since you've worshipped Thor? Oh, yeah, you listened the other night, I'll tell you. How many of you heard the night we did the, what does that sound like to you? Damn, you never know when things are going to go out on you. There goes my knee again. Well, of course, you know, you have to take things as they are. That's what I always say. Let's try it again. You always say I have to take things as they are, right? Very good. Just practicing. You know, speaking of practicing, you know, tonight, how many of you heard the show here a couple of weeks ago we did on the Black Mass that was celebrated at the Satanic Church? That was a wild show, but not really. You know, for every action there is an anti-action. In fact, the Newtonian law of physics applies to the acts of men. That for every demonstration on one side, it will produce an anti-demonstration on the other. For every good thing that happens in your life, you will get a kick in the slats to pay for it. It's a fact. There is no way out of it. It is a law of nature. A law of nature. And so I got an angry letter from a person who wrote and said that due to the fact that we put the Satanic Mass on the air, she finally discovered who it was who was responsible for all the problems in the universities. Me. Doesn't it feel groovy to be so powerful? Hey, I kind of dig it, I'll tell you that. Yeah, we have a note here for those of you who would like to look around for things, a note from Tryon, North Carolina, which is a swinging town. It swings for 12 minutes every Saturday afternoon after 1, just right after 1 o'clock in the afternoon. After that, forget it. A liberal reward for any information as to who stole my walnut coffin out of the Broadus Walker House in Mill Street some time ago. Ed Bell, Route 1, Tryon. Everywhere you look, people are being bad, I'll tell you. Oh, speaking of bad people, if you want to know what's happening down in the South, I mean, how you know, there's such a different way of life. I mean, every part of the country is, I believe, is philosophically and language-wise and food-wise removed from any other part of the country. There's just no connection. We happen by a fluke of nature to have the same government, and it's just a fluke. That doesn't say that it's always going to be. You know, wouldn't it be fascinating if you were to come back, somehow, magically, you were to be reconstituted and brought back to life 1,500 years from now, and to come back and see that America no longer exists, and there are 12 countries here on this continent in perpetual war with one another. Separate and distinct countries. I think this is more than just a wild guess. I think it could conceivably happen. Maybe more. Maybe as many as 15 to 20 different countries, all and with different types of government, and including a minimum of 3 kingdoms. A minimum of 3 kingdoms, and I would like to suggest that one of the kingdoms will be right here in New York. That's right, and we will have saints. There will be great saints all over, you know, of the early days of the kingdom. Saint Capote. There will be a reputed saint, Saint Gloria Steinem, which is doubted whether she existed or not, but there will be a lot of, you know, pros and cons. There will be tremendous theological arguments about that. There will be saint candidates. There will be Saint Mailer. And of course, then there'll be fallen saints. There'll be Saint Breslin, who was discredited late in the year 2750, when it was discovered he was a fat slob from Queens and never was from Manhattan at all. And and you know, so ultimately, this you could see why my show just ain't popular. Well, I am not invited to George Plimpton's on a Saturday night to talk about Arnie Palmer, you know, whatever it is they talk about at these elegant soirees. But I would like to submit to you a very interesting little item here. We got an item here from the Western Carolina Tribune, March 27th, 1970. And the title is 2 Men Found Dead at Still. I read to you in its entirety. Sheriff Carter R. McCall of Transylvania County is shown with the wildcat still found recently in the Balsam Grove section, where 2 men, apparently its proprietors, were found dead. One nearby and the other dead about 150 yards away. Dead were Doyle McCall, 46, and his brother Artelis McCall, 44. Deputy Ed McMullen, reported that there was no foul play evident, apparently poisoned. He said, and we quote him, "They were probably poisoned by dirties. In fact, this is the dirtiest still that I've taken in 20 years of still busting. They just drank this out of their skull." That concludes tonight's salute to Bacchus. Another lost and gone god. Bring it up there, Big Bird. Help. Down. That's enough. Help. You're watching, you know. You see that this is like no shoe you've ever worked, isn't it? My American College Dictionary, Random House, 1967, defines the word rabble as a disorderly crowd, a mob, in contemptuous use, the lowest class of people. Well, I describe myself as part of the rabble. All right? I'll let you argue about that. Of course, the word contempt today is a good word. If you are held in contempt by large numbers of people, you are obviously onto something good. I mean, that is a fact, Rudy. Hey, we have a note here. It says, "Dear Shep, what a night. It started out normally enough. My TV refused to exhibit any willingness to refrain from its little tricks, such as letting its vertical hold slip at a tender moment in a love story or a crucial moment in the ball game. But like I said, that's normal behavior for my $88 Great Eastern Special. So I went over to my stereo, only to find that my woofer had been shattered on a careless move by my sister. I decided to do what all good Jerseyites do when they're frustrated, completely up against the wall. Go out for a drive and yell at the other frustrated inmates of the Garden State. This is a normal Saturday night procedure. As soon as I left the house, I knew why everything was going haywire. There, hanging in a navy blue sky, was the largest full moon I have seen in a long time." Now, for those of you who don't believe in the full moon theory of human kookiness, you know, the cuckoodom world, all I can say is that I would like to suggest that anybody who doubts that this theory has any efficacy, it's a good word, I would like to suggest that you spend 20 minutes standing next to the switchboard in any radio station, television station, or precinct station in a 100-state area. We can tell what the calendar says by the frequency, the violence, the passion, and the involvement of the calls that come in, until finally they wind up just that incoherent So, don't put it down, friend. He says, using typical Jersey logic, I jumped in the car and tried to drive away from it, meaning the moon. But the side view mirror told me the moon was getting bigger. An amazing idea hit me. Turn on the radio to divert my attention. And what do I find? Shep is playing the high mass of the Satanic Church. I kept telling myself, this is a comedy album, right? No, he says, no, right. But as I was valiantly striving to deny any iotas of fear that wandered into my psyche, guys walking along in business suits in Jersey suddenly evolved into messengers of Satan. Around every corner, I was confronted with evil trees and traffic lights that suddenly went haywire. Okay. So I rode straight back home, ran upstairs, turned on the radio, and listened to the rest of your show. It was frightening, but I was inexplicably drawn back to it. At 11 o'clock, I shut off the radio and started walking out of my room to the John. But out of the corner of an eye, I noticed one last manifestation of Beelzebub. I have a portable radio sitting on my desk. The antenna was partially broken off by my cousin when a repulsive to him, not me, Rolling Stones song was being played. So now these are little human conflicts. So I welded an extension to the telescoping part that was left and topped it off with a hand-wrought iron peace sign. Tonight, I had the antenna standing straight up in the air. But right after you went off the air, as I was leaving the room, the peace symbol, slowly and deliberately, descended to my desk. I'd like to see Joe Franklin explain that one. Holy cow, Shep, it was the craziest show you've ever done in the 8 years I've been listening. You have mastered the more subtle uses of the medium. You bet your thing I have, friend. I have only given you a slight peek into the interior of what can be done with this medium. I can strip your bones clean, leave you standing in a field with the wind blowing through your rib cage. That's enough. That's enough. I just thought you ought to know there's more where that came from. In fact, there is an infinite well of depravity. Depravity. That's a little Italian restaurant over on East 68th Street. Fantastic pasta. Their green noodles, friends, are made of the original green. Speaking of decadent places on East 68th Street, you know, it's terrible the way the mind works. You know, you go from one to the other, and the next thing you know, it's a total unity. You can't help it. Things connect up. Sick, depraved evil. Which reminds me, this is WOR, New York. You got that sneaky record? Oh, that other one. Get ready. All you guys pulling your guts out there. It's coming now. Pulling your gut. Mr. Shepherd, please don't use that vulgar word. There are a lot of vulgar words where that came from. Everywhere you look, out of the darkness come swirling, mystic signals. Omens, portents. Howling dogs in the night. The beating of eternal waves against the sea of Stygian creation. Blackness. Let that marinate for a while. The deep, felt, barely understood, thickly realized, fugitive suspicion that every stone that is cast in the water continues to drop down and down and down and down to unimagined depths, never to reach the bottom. Is there no end to it? My name is Ebenezer Scrooge. My name is Marley. I knew we were doing the wrong thing, but what could I do about it? Oh, that's tonight's birthday salute. And would you please reset that? We may need that a little bit later on. You know what I constantly think of? I just can't help it. You know, most people have very conventional minds. And I'm not saying I don't. I'm just saying most people do. And they think of things as an entity. So when you pick up the New York Times, you think of it as the New York Times. Now what if tomorrow morning you were picking up the Times and you opened it up and a giant fist leaped out of the page and BAM! Knocked you flat right on your bazinkus. Now, would you blame the Times, or would you think you had gone out of your bird? I don't know. Now, most people think of their radio as this nice, friendly appliance. It's an appliance, remember. It plays nice music for me when I'm getting ready for bed. Or it gives them the time. It's like any nice clock, and it's the right time. You notice that Mr. Gambling never tells you it is 12 minutes past too late, which would probably be the right time for you, friend. Oh, no, he comes out and says, well, it's 5 minutes past 8, and now let's get back to the sound of music. That's old John. Totally predictable. And it interviews people, right? There's always somebody on somebody's program who says, Barry, I'll tell you, me and my wife wrote a book called The Eagle Screams Over Brooklyn. It tells you about what's happening to this town, and it tells you about the corruption of the boxing commission of this city of New York. I was saying you hear that jazz night after night, day after day, year after year, eon after eon. That's what the radio is. And then endless yards of rock, which is predictable. One of the most predictable of all things in our world today is rock. Predictable. And suddenly you turn on your radio. You're looking for a Rolling Stone. You've just left one of the eternal Barrys on the radio who's interviewing another group of guys named Barry. And you're scurrying along the dial. And you go, you're that eternal guy. I know, and what's I gone? Blah, blah, blah. The news and all the rest of the jazz is coming out of that little $12 appliance. Went out of the maw of its inexplicable field coil. Went out of the dark sneakiness of its magnetic cord, 3-inch rattly voice speaker. What the hell is that? You say. You hit the radio on the side. And what does it do? Like I say, things are going to get better. They always get better. They always say, it gets better before it gets worse. It's darkest before the dawn. And I always say that you got to look for the silver lining, In every dark cloud, there's a silver lining, is what I always say. I always say, weather, more. There's a lot you can do, friend. A lot. Once again, Herb. I do this to blow the dust out of the tube. See, what you do when you have problems with valve grinding, and you leave a little of the valve grinding solution in the valve, sometimes burn gas. Oh, listen, I'd like to salute. How many of you are fans of medical journals? Who isn't? As a matter of fact, they got an entire fan mag now called The TV Doctors. It's not about TV, it's called The TV Doctors. And they're all sitting in the front there with their stethoscopes hanging out, looking dynamic. And have you noticed that none of those TV doctors look like all real doctors look? Bald and fat with rimless glasses. Every doctor I know looks a little like that. I've never seen a doctor that looked like Richard Chamberlain in my life. Or Vince Edwards. No, my favorite doctor, I have a doctor who looks a little like a bowling pin. And he cries a lot. None of which ever happens on TV, you know. And I keep asking him things like, Doctor, what do you know about the PIP? Nothing. He said, you know, they never discovered nothing about that yet. I said, well, what do you mean they never discovered? No doctor on TV ever says we don't know anything about that. What is this? No wonder everybody wants to go into their TV set and go to the general hospital where Vince Edwards is doing the operating. I mean, he never flubs the dub. He never cuts your gizzard out and says, I thought it was your liver. Doggone it, it was right there where the liver should be. Son of a gun, the gizzard's gone now. You're going to have to do it without it. So what are you going to do? 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. And he looked me right in the eye and says, well, we don't know anything about that. I said, what do you mean? You're a scientist, aren't you? He said, but scientists don't know anything about it. I said, what about space? They know all about that. He says, don't you kid yourself. He says, wait till that big male fist comes out from behind Venus and knocks the next one right out of the sky. I said, you mean they think that might happen? He said, you bet your bippy. So the 3 scientists have got the male fist theory right now that's being promulgated, and a lot of them believe it. So, friends, we are down at the bottom of a dark pit, all of us, walking around scratching. When is that chipper going to get relevant? When is he going to talk about the real things, about housing? Ecology. When's he going to get relevant? Turn him off. Let's see. We have a commercial, haven't we? Sneak it in, Herb. I would recommend right now that you sit down, make out a check for $2, buy a money order for $2, and put it in the mail as soon as possible. Send it to Year 1. Year 1. 460 West 34th Street, New York, New York. Year 1. They will send you a secret, sinister, fantastic, beautiful, mystic poster that will look down from your walls in a great swirling flash of cosmic light. Year 1. Not only that, it is a day glow poster that if you have the right kind of light, stuff will come out that'll probably get you busted. And if your mind is not totally blown with this poster, they'll send your dough back instantly. Probably by messenger. It will be delivered by a small guy with pointed ears. The Year 1 poster. Heaven, earth, rock, Beatles, sound time, come together at the kingdom come. The address again. Send your check or money order, $2, to Year 1, 460 West 34th Street, New York, New York. Zip code 10001. Do it now. La da 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 da. La da da ti ti ti. Da 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 ti. Hey, you know, speaking of, this is a sinister show. This the evil. By the way, speaking of sinister, evil things, I have a story in 2 current magazines. We're continually getting letters from people saying, when are your next stories coming out in the magazines, or what magazines? And I have two of them, this current on the newsstands now. One is in Car and Driver. I think you'll find it interesting if you're a car cuckoo. One is in Car and Driver, the current issue, the May issue, and the other is in Lampoon, the Blight issue. Did you see their last month's issue, the Greed issue? Greed? And I would suggest you pick them up both, especially the Blight thing. In fact, I'm proud of both of those pieces. They're worlds apart. And one is in Lampoon, the current issue, or the Blight issue. They don't have them by months, Lampoon. And if you haven't run into Lampoon, and I have no commercial connection with them, if you haven't run into them, it is one of the few really funny magazines that come out in a long time. Did you see their ad, Herb, for the long-suppressed erotic drawings of Norman Rockwell? In the new magazine, Avant Gauche. So I would like to suggest you pick up a copy. You may find it interesting. It may make you madder than hell, but all good humor does. I don't think any real humor is any good unless it makes you vaguely mad. I'm serious. I'm very serious. I'm talking about the difference between humor and comedy here. That when you write comedy never makes anybody mad. It's very innocent, and not only innocent, it's usually quite surface and what they the old phrase they used to use, zany. It's brainless, really. It's there it is, and it's good. I enjoy good comedy once in a while. Nothing like a half an hour spent sitting busting your head watching the Three Stooges. That's pure unadulterated comedy. But humor is something else. In fact, even now, one of the greatest humorists in America ever, one of the greatest that probably the world has ever produced, who's dead now, probably close to 70 years, and who wrote most of his stuff about the time of the Civil War and before, is still suppressed in many parts of the country. Mark Twain. That's humor. I mean, nobody's going to suppress the Three Stooges or Bob Hope, But I'll tell you, when real humor starts popping up, people get very angry. Because generally, most people really have not much sense of humor. And in fact, if they do have a sense of humor, it's usually at somebody else's expense. And you'll find many people can write cutting satires of other people. But try letting him write a cutting satire on his own group, and he gets very uncomfortable. Vedi. Speaking of humor, when you look at cartoons, for example, most people, the cartoon world is great. I'm not talking about the strip cartoons, because I find that something like, Snoopy. I avoid Snoopy the way other people avoid the chicken pox, and for probably the same reason. Snoopy makes me itch. I mean, I break out in little red spots all over when I. It's interesting to see the decline and fall, and by the way, the rise in popularity of an art form. Usually when a thing is in decline, it becomes extremely popular, and that isn't to say that all popular things are in decline, so don't jump to the other side. That when the early Schulz cartoons were around, back in the early 50s, he's been around that long, his stuff had a beautiful, fey, cutting incisiveness. But then he discovered the cutie pie world. I think one character was, in a sense, very real sense, the Mephistopheles that invaded that nest. Snoopy. That's right. That when Snoopy was just a mute character in the background, he was extremely funny. The minute he became the star of the strip, he became tiresome to me, frankly. The endless, I dream now that I am playing in the hockey rink and all that. Oh, come on. It was groovy as long as poor old Schroeder was dreaming this stuff. And have you noticed some of the great characters have slipped out of the strip almost imperceptibly? Among them, Schroeder. A great name, Schroeder. I mean, that's the ultimate definitive kid name. But nevertheless, I've noticed that as his humor declines and his whimsy cutie pie quotient improves and gets larger, he is accumulating a greater and greater audience. It's very interesting. I noticed this about many other things. Have you noticed one of the most popular poets of our time is one of the gloppiest poets probably of all time? When we talk about total mindless sentimentality, talking about McEwen. Now, this is another example of it, you see. And often the same people will dig Snoopy. So you find yourself in an endless fight against this. But talking about cartoons, you don't often take a cartoon seriously, like as if it really happened. If you looked at a cartoon and you see this, this scene, and you laugh at it, like say the old Charles Addams cartoons, which is really of another era of cartooning. But you never could think in terms of, well, now if I went into this house, and there was this actual house, and this evil guy with fangs came to the door, and a bat flew past, would it be funny? Well, not necessarily. Would it or wouldn't it? That's a good question. On the other hand, would it be, a lot of people say that we reduce to humor that which we fear the most. In short, there's no question about it that all of us fear dark houses with bats flying in the rafters. We do. And so by creating a cartoon, like say Charles Addams cartoons about this subject, we begin to laugh at it. But that doesn't mean it goes away. It's still there. In other words, the fear is there. In fact, it could even be more. And so it's no coincidence to me that the most popular cartoon of today, which is Charlie Brown and Snoopy in that crowd, is really about little kid whimsy. It's about as far away from today's world about as irrelevant as you can ultimately get. The idea of a dog imagining he's playing hockey with the Montreal Canadiens is fairly irrelevant, I would say, to the central vortex of what is happening to our world. And and I'm not saying that relevance is necessarily a thing that has to be spelled out. But the curious thing about our humor is that quite often, have you noticed that there's now a great body of medical humor? To show doctors. There are dozens and dozens of doctor cartoons in almost every cartoon, in almost every magazine. There's usually a psychiatrist. In fact, you can compile books of psychiatric cartoons. The psychiatrist sitting back of the desk and the guy sitting in front of the desk, and you see the guy. A typical psychiatric cartoon is you see this lady lying on the couch, see, and she's saying, "Doctor, I don't know what it is. I have these strangest urges." And you see the doctor in the background. She doesn't see him, see. And the doctor is wearing her fur coat and her hat, and he's camping it up in front of a mirror with an evil look on his face in the background, see. Well, all right. This is a typical example of laughing at the problem. Then there's this other old canard, this one where it shows this doctor sitting in his office, and he's saying, he's just looking at a patient. See, the patient is sitting across from him, and you see his diploma, the doctor's diploma, hanging on the wall. It says psychiatric and so forth and so on. He's obviously a psychiatrist with a beard and everything. He's sitting there, and he says to this guy, he says, "Well, now, when did this first come on? This delusion of yours that you've turned into a carrot?" And you see the guy sitting across from the desk. He's a carrot. In other words, it's no delusion at all. The guy has turned into a carrot. But the doctor prefers to think of it as a delusion. So which is sicker, the doctor or the patient? It's a good question. So ultimately, have you noticed that almost everybody today, one of the things that we've done, psychiatry has done for us, it's given us an escape. In short, have you noticed that almost every great evil character in history is today defined in terms of not evil, but he's simply sick, which is not nearly as bad as evil. Very interesting. In short, in the world of psychiatry, there is no evil. There's only sickness, which is highly questionable. Watch me get deluged with angry letters about that one. I'm saying it is questionable. And I'm not the one who is... I'll give you official footnotes if you're curious. That there are a lot of people who are very well equipped psychiatrically, I mean, as far as their professional credentials are concerned, that are beginning to question that. I'm not alone in this. And so here it is, you know. So we invent psychiatry to somehow, in a sense, assuage our sense of conscience about evil. And so an axe murderer today will always blame society. You'll find that anybody who does anything violent, if say a kid takes a Molotov cocktail and throws it at the library, he hasn't done anything bad. It's society, evil society, that's caused him to do this. And it is a sick society. The word sick runs through a lot of things today. And this makes it kind of easy. I mean, it's kind of nice if you're Eichmann, for example, to really believe you're not evil. You're just sick. You had a bad childhood. And if they had given you the right analysis when you were at the right age, you wouldn't have turned out to be this. It's very questionable. In short, if you were to take the psychiatric view of history, there was nobody ever bad ever. And never, no. There were just some guys who were sicker than others. I can just see, can you imagine Attila the Hun? Yeah, Attila the Hun, he's laying on the psychiatric couch, and the doctor is saying, now look, you must understand, Attila, you're not evil, you're merely disturbed. Now tell me about your father. And he's laying there. Well, now you see what it automatically does. It makes Attila less fearsome until he cracks your skull open. And so ultimately, why I brought all this up, this cartoon thing. Here's an interesting example of a cartoon affecting medicine. You know, usually cartoons are about medicine, and the cartoon world is affected by what happens in medicine. Here's a cartoon that affected medicine, and it's from Lancet. Now, the Lancet is probably one of the most respected journals in the world. It is the official journal of the medical fraternity of Great Britain. You've heard of Lancet. It's their version of the JAMA, the Journal of Medicine. And here's a picture. I couldn't believe it. I remember the cartoon. Do you recall a cartoon in Playboy that showed this guy? He's got this fantastic-looking chick in his office. It was a cartoon of a doctor, and he's got this wild-looking chick in the office, and she really is, she's got it all there. I mean, you talk about glandular development, friend. She looked like a pile of watermelons having a fist fight, you know, and there she is, this fantastic chick, and he's got a stethoscope, obviously. He needs a special kind for this type of girl, and he's got a double-barrel stethoscope, two of them sticking out there, see? And he's got it plugged into his ears, and underneath it says something like, another doctor says, what's that, Charlie? He says, well, I like stereo. And he's listening to it. Well, all right, let me tell you what happened. That was a cartoon. It was just a cartoon that appeared in Playboy. Here's what appeared in Lancet, sir. And this is in Lancet. This is in one of the most official journals of medicine in the world. I wonder if anybody sent this to Hef. I think I will. It says, sir, I have designed and assembled a stereophonic stethoscope. The idea, but mind you, not the design, came to me from a Playboy cartoon. Having used this instrument now for 2 months, I regard the ordinary stethoscope as an obsolete instrument. The essential features are the two chest pieces with ipsilateral and contralateral connections to the earpieces. See accompanying figure. It can easily be assembled from the components of two ordinary stethoscopes. The tube joining the chest pieces should be around the same length as the other tubes. My experiences to date suggest that the instrument has great and main advantages over the ordinary stethoscope. 1, superior quality of sound, as in any other stereophonic device. Better localization of the source. 2, The two chest pieces, diaphragms or bells, can be placed at a variable distance from each other on the chest. Thus, the different heart sounds can be picked up simultaneously, and confusion about their origin is lessened. I tentatively recommend many rules for its use. He says this is going to be a major improvement on an age-old instrument, the stethoscope. Signed and so forth. It's a doctor who is in the Baseline Hospital in Beirut, Lebanon. Also experimental medicine specialist. In other words, he built this stethoscope from a cartoon in Playboy, and it's an unbelievably successful instrument. Which is to say now, at what point does art imitate life, and does life begin to imitate art? You know, and now we're, oh, please. I feel it coming on again. Well, you know what, the way I see it, that if you save your money, you know, and if you put your money away for a rainy day, a stitch in 9 saves 10, or a stitch in 10 saves 9, that's the way. She comes on you, you know, just like that, and you can't do much about it. Just sort of sneaks up. Begins to lap at your knees. You know, I think what I'd like to do this year is take a 2-week vacation and go out to see the lobster race in Cleveland. Just cover it this year. Maybe I'd like to go to see the Bratwurst Festival in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. Nothing wrong with that. Of course, 6 of one, half dozen the other, you find yourself being relevant anyway. 6 of 2 and 9 of the other, you find yourself being relevant. So 10 to 9 and 16 to 1, it doesn't make one damn bit of difference anyway. 6 of one, half dozen the other is the way it finally winds up. Yes, sir. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Hick, hike, hoke. Huius, in hoc, agricola comp, in es spittle lauk. I have cast Satan's benediction upon thee.